Okay, well, we're nearing 100 attendees, which is great for a meeting that's also recorded and posting. So I understand when I advertise the fact that we're going to post the meeting after, that it kind of really reduces the live attendance. But so I really appreciate you being here and spending your Thursday evening with us. I was just quickly going through who's in the waiting room. It's a real good mix of new families and current families. So I'm really pleased to see current families who may have heard this me talk many times that are back to listen to more, and welcome the new families. Hopefully you'll get something out of this meeting. My name is Murray Finlay. I'm the executive director of the club. You will likely get many emails from me over the course of your time with the club, for which I apologise. There's lots of information to get out to the members, so I try and do that as sparingly as possible. But when information needs to get out there, we have to send it out. Also on the call is Gavin Richards, who's the director of operations for the club. We'll go through roles and responsibilities a little bit later in the presentation. And also with us, we have Eric Cockle, who's the president of the club. And as Eric will touch on, we're a 501c3 non-profit organization, which means we have a parent-run board. So I'm going to pass it on to Eric for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to take over and get into the presentation from there. Eric?
Great, thanks. Good evening, everyone. It is great to see this turnout. In the past, when we've had it in person for the last, 8, 10 years, it's been a pretty sparse turnout. So I'm very glad that a lot of people could join us. As Murray had said, it is great to see so many people to kind of get a refresher on the club, kind of what some of the logistics of going through the season is going to be like, which Murray and Gavin will run through. Kind of almost as importantly, expectations for the players and the parents, particularly on the sidelines, is an important part of being a good club member. Murray just mentioned that we are a 501c3 organization, which means we are nonprofit. So, I know it is not a particularly inexpensive endeavor to participate in Chicago Edge, but we do try to keep that cost as low as possible while still providing kind of the value that we think is important. And important in that is that Chicago Edge is a community-based soccer club. So we are really focused on the Oak Park, River Forest, and a little bit of the surrounding area as the core membership and what we're trying to the community we're trying to serve. So with that, there are other things that we do with the club as far as trying to reach out to the community, and that's really where the board is focused, is trying to increase our community engagement, provide some fundraising for our financial aid program, and to a much smaller extent, just providing that oversight that's required for a nonprofit organization. But day-to-day operations of the club is all handled by Murray and Gavin, and the professional coaches that work for the club part-time. So I'll turn it back over to Murray.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, let's get started. So at this point, I usually cut and paste my bio page in the chat, but I have forgotten to cut it. So just a little bit briefly about myself. I think I know a lot of the parents in the club already. I've been with Oak Park River Forest Strikers, which was the club prior to Chicago Edge, since 2003. So I've been in the community running soccer programs for a long time. I don't live in the community. I live in LaGrange Park. I'm a soccer dad too. I've got a 5-year-old daughter who I coach at AYSO and a 1-year-old son. So it's an excellent club to work for and lead. It's a great community. I'm sure everyone here agrees because you live in it. And it's a great parent group. I've run soccer programs in different communities in Chicago, and some communities, without naming, be more difficult than others. So I really enjoy running this club in a particular community. Basically, there were two clubs. Just a brief history of how Chicago Edge started. There was Oak Park River Forest Strikers, and then was River Forest Rapids that Gavin ran back in the day. But as we'll discuss a little bit, we don't have that many resources in the community. And when two clubs of a similar size are in a community fighting for the same resources, players and fields, it can become very difficult. So we merged in 2011, 2012 season. So this is our 11th year. And we formed Chicago Edge. And why we call Chicago Edge? Because we are on the edge of Chicago. I did not pick the name. I got outvoted, but you know, it's a good name, and I like it. I've got used to it over the years, put it that way. So the agenda tonight is a little bit of a club overview, just about how big we are, the scope and the size of the club, because I realize it's quite easy just to see the club as your one individual team. If you have one player in our club, you know, you can see it because we have so many different fields. It can feel like sometimes lots of disparate little teams and little mini clubs. So I just wanted to give you an idea of just how big the organization is. A season outline with some important dates for you to remember that are all on the website as well. A little bit about our coaches and the background of those coaches. Our online platform, which, as many of you know, is Sprocket Sports. We switched over about 18 months ago from another platform. As with any new platform, there are teething problems, but I really like the current platform we use. Very intuitive, user-friendly so far. So if you have any feedback about, and I'll mention this when we talk about it, our platform and some ideas, the developers are quite responsive to ideas or new ideas about how to make the platform better. Some tips to navigate the club, how to get the most out of your experience with us, some of our club goals and core values, what we're trying to achieve, some player development information, and some tips about how to be a good sports parent to get most out of your child's youth sports experience. And incidentally, if anything arises that you want to have a question about, please just put it in the club chat. Gavin's going to monitor the chat, and I'll answer it in real time as much as I can. If there is a generic question about the club you would like to answered, we will have a question Q&A at the end, so you can unmute yourself at the end and ask it then. So club overview for the upcoming season. We have 47 teams, which is the upper range. You know, in the last 10 years, we've fluctuated between about 42 teams and 51 teams. 607 travel players. We've been as high as 650, but quite frankly, with the resources in our community in terms of fields, that's probably getting up to maximum capacity. I think once you get up to about 650 players, it becomes pretty difficult to run the club properly. You know, you drive down Lake Street and see some very nice turf fields, but the reality is that we don't get access or much access to those fields, particularly midweek, just because we're quite far down the pecking order. There's other sports organizations get it first, primarily because we straddle a number of different communities. We're not just Oak Park, we're not just River Forest. We have outside players from Chicago, Elmwood Park, Cicero, those kind of areas, and we also have tryouts, which boots us down the food chain a little bit. But the field space we do get is certainly enough for the current number of players, teams that we have. We have an Ed Juniors program that perhaps your son or daughter started in. That's 250 players currently, give or take, age between 3 and 7. It's a pre-travel program that we run through River Forest Park District and the Park District of Oak Park. That's become very popular in the last 2 or 3 years, and a main way to get players into the club, quite frankly. And then in our summer program, we have a 7-week summer camp program with the Park Districts of Oak Park and River Forest that this year had about 750 players in, both edge and non-edge players. And it's a fantastic way to have non-edge players experience what the club and experience what travel soccer, a little bit about what travel soccer is all about. So a little bit about our supplemental programs. So you'll notice when we go into our calendar that our U7 to U12 teams have nothing scheduled between November 6th and December 21st. Some of our families at that age who do multiple different activities, like a few weeks as a breather. We also have June 12th to August 11th, our summer free for all our teams. And that's where we introduce our supplemental programs. Between November 6th and December 21st, we have winter clinics at Chicago Soccer on North Avenue. And we have OPRF Community League, which is a is exactly what it describes. It's a community league for all players in the community, whether they play for Edge, any other organization. So it's a chance for our kids to play with their neighbors, school friends, their siblings perhaps, and create their own teams or sign up individually, and I put them in. And that's a 6-week league that we run in the off season for our U7 to U12 teams. Our U13 and above teams train all the way through winter. So they're a little bit more scheduled than the younger players. And the summer, we do some activities. We do the free play that many of you joined in. We do a high school program, but the summer camps is our main focus in the summer. Now, here's our season outline. I'm going to guess most of the parents on this call are parents of U7 to U15. There's unlikely to be some high school parents here, but our preseason camp, as you know, is going this week. We are using our in-out day tomorrow, so many of our teams will be going tomorrow. The fall season starts next week, so we go 10 weeks in the fall, August 21st to October 29th. Then we begin our winter season. For the U7 to U12, that'll start Jan 8th, so we have a November, December break there. The U13 plus go all the way from November 6th to spring break, which is the week before spring break, which is March 23rd. The spring season replicates the fall season in as much as it's 10 weeks, and it runs April 2nd to June 10th. And again, from June 10th to next season, which will start about August 13th, we have some downtime and some supplemental programs running during the summer months. The high school girls and boys, they obviously play in high school. So the boys are currently in high school, as many of you know. Their high school soccer season begins now. It's just started with tryouts last week. So that'll end late October, and we pick the boys up in our teams in November 6th. The girls is the opposite way around. We have our high school, our U15 to U19 girls currently practicing. They started their training this week, and they go all the way to President's Day, mid-February. At that point, they go to their high school to play their high school season. So we work pretty closely with the local high schools just to complement each other's season. Now, a little bit about our coaches. Hopefully you have met your coach, at least received some communication from them. The great thing about our coaching group is that it's very, very consistent. And we've had some of these coaches with us from the beginning of the club. A lot of these coaches from the beginning of the club. I think Kat's been coaching in the community for as long as I have, since the early 2000s. James, Caesar have been with us 8-9 years. We have a couple of coaches who are not in there, haven't got their headshots yet. We've got 2 new coaches for this upcoming season. Aidan Richards, if you recognize the last name, because it's Gavin's son. And we have Devin Flores as well. Aidan and Nate are former players, so they're well used to the club and how we run things, and they went through their coaching licenses, and we're really pleased to have them join our coaching group. And the reason I talk about consistency with the coaches as much is because it's quite unusual to have a coaching group this consistent, because coaching is a pretty transient profession, quite frankly. There's only a finite amount of hours during the week where coaches can work evenings and weekends. So there really is a ceiling about how much you can earn. So a lot of our coaches have second jobs. So we're at the mercy of their perhaps their primary income or their primary job schedule. And some of them have families, and some of it they have multiple part-time jobs. So it's important you find out about your coach, what's their preferred method of communication. You know, for example, Frank Patano there has 4 children. He manages a bank and he coaches. So he is all over the place schedule-wise, but he prefers communication. You know, he replies late in the evening just because he's so busy during the day. So please introduce yourself to your coach, find out about them, their preferred method of communication. And it's a difficult thing to coach. Coaching is difficult. Much like teaching at the moment, you know, a coach it needs to be all things to all people. You know, back in the day, many years ago, back in last century, coaching was seen as a very behaviorist. If you're into learning psychology, it's people were more behaviorist in as much as they manipulated athletes' behavior based on usually negative or positive cues, so that the coach who shouts and screams, that's not best practices anymore. These days, it's a much more constructivist profession. You know, that holistic view, the Socratic method of asking the good questions, guiding them to the correct answer. And where you fall in that continuum between behaviorist and constructivist as a coach really is dictated by your experience, your personality, and your professional development. So we've work with our coaches to move them as far as we can towards the constructivist side of delivery. You know, some coaches are more structured and more discipline orientated. And in that respect, it takes a few years to really work out which coaches are best suited to which age groups. For example, you know, personally, I can coach high school boys, but because high school boys really demand structure and a little bit more discipline, I'm not a coach that really, in my personality, likes to really discipline that much. You know, I don't need. I'm not a hard-headed person, but I can be if I need to. I just find it draining. So I'm not best suited to coach high school boys, for example. Whereas Cat Chicos there, he's great at coaching that kind of 8th grade boy age because they need structure, they need rules, they need black and white rules that they know what's right and what's wrong. So he's very good at creating that environment for those kind of age groups. And then, as you'll notice there, we only have one female coach, and believe me, it's not through the lack nor want of trying. We've been trying to recruit as many female coaches as possible for many years, and the sad reality is that probably for every 15 or 16 resumes I get, I may get, if from men, I may get one resume from a female. And there are many reasons for that, but primarily is for whatever reason the girls don't necessarily see youth sports, coaching, refereeing, administration as a viable profession as they get into adulthood. So to counter that, I just wanted to touch real quick on a program we started last year to do our little part to kind of change the narrative in terms of women in our sport. We started a women's empowerment learning series that Renee heads up. It's called Strong Bodies, Strong Minds, and Strong Futures. And basically, it's a learning series for our female and non-binary players. So, for example, we have get-togethers several times a year for those girls in our club to learn more about how they can use sport going into adulthood. For example, we had three sessions last year, the first one being a panel with ex-players who are involved in sport and adulthood in different contexts. You know, there's different, some were coaches, some were sports lawyers, some were administration, and they were just kind of giving examples to our young players about how they stay in the sport and stay in with soccer. The next one was about nutrition, how to properly fuel female bodies to balance multiple sports as they go through childhood. And the last one, because the incidence of injuries among young female players is so much greater than male players, it was about injury prevention. So if you have a young girl that's just joining our club for the first time, please look out for the calendar for those events, and I'm just planning them with Renee. So we'll advertise those once we have the final details together. There should be one in late fall. So tips to navigate the club. I can't stress this enough. Please use the app. And if you're not comfortable with an app, please use the website. Our app is called Sprocket Sports. Everything calendar-wise, any details about the club and other resources are all on the app and the website. Once you log in to your account on the website and the app, it will have your specific calendar, any messages from the coach, any directions for practices and games that you may need. So please use that as much as you can. If you have any issues navigating either of those things, please reach out to me or Thomas Schaller. I'll talk about him in a second. Gavin, if there's any, I'll just cut off there. Gav, if there's any questions that I could answer, please let me know on the chat.
I will. There isn't. I've answered them.
All right, cool. I just saw some chat notifications there. So please RSVP, respond to your coach about attendance at practices and games, particularly about games. Hopefully everybody knows once we'll have the game schedule sent out. The coaches are working on them now. Some of the deadlines for game changes are this weekend. So hopefully sometime next week, we'll have the game schedule up. Please match that up with your family schedule, your player's schedule, and let your coach know as soon as possible if they're unable to attend a game. I know life happens. Sometimes you don't know this far in advance, but if you know your player's missing a game, please notify the coach on the decline feature on the app or the website. Because a lot of our rosters, some are lower, some are higher, but the coach can bring in guest players if they're short. We don't want a team to go short players for any games. And to prevent that, the coach really needs to know who's showing up for each game. And do that for practice as well as a common courtesy, so the coach can plan accordingly to the numbers of players that they're going to have at the session. And look out for email notifications on practice day for any cancelled practices. We've all got used to that this week, unfortunately. So we are at the mercy of the Park Districts, Oak Park, River Forest and River Forest Park District, to run the fields. So if they turn around to us and say, like they did the other day, the fields are too wet, they've taken in too much rain, they're closed, we don't have any recourse. We can't argue our piece and get them back on. We've just got to cancel practice, unfortunately. And we don't have access to an indoor facility that can accommodate all the players that we have. So we usually get notified of field closures before it becomes available, that information becomes available on the Park District website. So we try and get that information usually around 12:30, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock at the latest, just so families can plan their evenings accordingly if practices are cancelled. Touch wood, spring season, I think we've maybe had one evening cancelled, which is highly unusual. Usually it's a few more days than that. So fingers crossed fall won't be too all over the place weather-wise as this week has been. Now, who to go to with questions for those families who have been with us a few years? Colette Heafy was our administrator since the beginning of the club for the last 11 years. She retired. She wanted to go and spend some time with her grandkids, quite understandably. So we had to reshuffle a little bit in terms of the administration of the club. So, for example, if you have a question, let's say a basic question about your team schedule, your specific player feedback, if you wanted some insight about your player, how they're doing, what they need to work on, that kind of thing. If there's a team dynamic issues, sometimes particularly young boys, when they're very competitive, rub each other the wrong way. If there's something we need to know that might affect team dynamics or minor discipline issues, your coach would be your first point of reference. So you would approach your coach with that question or to relay them information about your player if needed. If you have a question about your coach or an issue with your coach and you don't feel comfortable going with them, you come to me. Anything about the programs the club has or any major discipline issues, that I would deal with that. So you would email me or call me. Anything related to field, uniforms and tournaments, you would go to Gavin. And if you had any issues with the website in terms of your registration or your payment, if you needed to change credit card or that may be, you would go to Thomas Schaller, and all our contact details are on the website. We do have a full-time accountant that does the finances of the club now. Colette did that last year, but we hired a full-time accountant. But I don't think there would be an instance where you need to go directly to her. So if you have any questions at all that you're not sure who to approach, just come to me and I'll do my best to help you out. So why do we do this? Why do we exist as a club? What are we trying to achieve for our players? The short answer is we're trying to develop a love for the game. Really, we're just using soccer as part of a lifelong healthy lifestyle. There's lots of research out there, and some of you may know it, that sports participation just leads to so many different benefits for not only young children but adults. And the more sports you do, the better, the more the benefits, not just physically but socio-emotional benefits as well. There's lots of research that backs that up. So basically, all we want to do is promote a healthy lifestyle going into adulthood beyond the time the kids are with the club, and we use soccer to develop that healthy lifestyle. The vast majority of youth players play for fun. Any research out there would indicate that 95% of kids play for fun, regardless of what level they're playing at. So that's the focus of our organization. Now, a lot of parents can kind of say, well, if I'm just looking for fun, I can go and play AYSO. But, if kids don't have fun playing soccer, they're not going to keep at it. There's so many different things in this country they may be doing. They could be playing video games, other sports. So we have to make it fun, because the kids need to come back and keep playing soccer. It doesn't matter how good we get them if they're going to give up at 13 or 14. Now, what fun is can mean many different things to many different players. It can be hanging out with friends. It can be getting better at something. It can be achieving something. And enjoyment is different from fun. I know lots of people who, I have friends who run marathons, for example. They enjoy running marathons, but at mile 23, they definitely would not describe it as fun. So enjoyment can come from achieving something. And it's not always fun. When you lose a game of soccer in the last minute, it definitely isn't fun. But the overall experience and the lessons learned from it is the enjoyment part of the process. So the 3 pillars of the club are character, community, and commitment, and our mission statement reflects that. So take a bit of time on our website to go over a mission statement and our core values. But really quickly, the Chicago Edge Soccer Club, which is a non-profit that Eric touched on, provides competitive players in the Oak Park River Forest community a travel soccer experience which promotes character, building an environment of good sportsmanship. Professionally trained coaches help committed players develop excellence in individual and team soccer skills, all while focusing on long-term development. So I'll touch a little bit on long-term development because, here we go. I'll just talk about how to develop players in terms of short and long-term and the difference between the two. So we have to focus on the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are just maximum ball contact, quite basically. As I said before, there's our kids play many different sports, they do many different things, they have many different interests. So unfortunately, the 3 hours they may be at practice or 2 hours they're at practice may be the only time they're touching a soccer ball during the week. So to develop the fundamental skills of the game, they have to touch a soccer ball as much as possible in those 2 or 3 hours. So that changes the practice somewhat. We have a play, practice, play structure. So when the kids get there, they go immediately into 4 or 5 minutes of scrimmaging. While that not only because the kids enjoy it, it gets them there on time, or encourages them to get there, to be there on time. It gives the coach a bit of time to let the kids just decompress, get in practice mode, so the coach can start the practice. And the end, during the practice part, which is the middle of the session, they work on a particular topic. And at the end of the session, it's a conditioned scrimmage. So that's usually a manipulated scrimmage where they're working on something specific, some specific topic, or it could just be a scrimmage where the coach is pulling out individual players to do some one-on-one coaching with that, or just have a one-on-one chat with a player. So we have an open practice policy. Again, our kids are very well scheduled, so we need this open practice policy so they have the flexibility to be able to attend a practice. So if your player can't make their team practice for whatever reason, they can go to another practice with another team. I always tell this throughout the year when I get parents saying, well, the practice schedule doesn't work for my schedule. It's absolutely fine if that's the case, but please make an effort to try and go to another practice. That may be with the same coach and a different team in that age group. So if you're on the 2013 select, for example, you can pick a practice with a 2013 competitive or 2013 premier. It'll still be Coach James or Coach Milan if it's a girl. But try and make an effort to make up any missed practice. That really goes a long way to in your development or your young player's development. So to encourage a lifelong love of the sport, we try and get them to play in a friendly environment as possible. So we throw on Friday night clinics. So a lot of our players, we get 78 to 80 of our players out every Friday night, and we did in spring, to come to our free play session, which is essentially any kid who wants to in the club will show up. U7 to U12, our coaches will just put them into teams, and they get to play with different sexes, different ages, different abilities, and they get to learn on their own time. They get to be creative. They don't have a coach coaching them. They just get to have fun with their friends playing soccer. We want them to associate soccer with having fun. And it's a great way to learn. Maybe the best way to learn is just having playing small-sided games, being creative, and trying to solve their own problems on the soccer field. The U13 to U15 have a more structured practice, extra practice on a Friday night. It usually takes the shape of speed and agility or technical practice with a ball. And then we have specialist clinics like goalkeeping. So our club goalkeepers can sharpen their goalkeeper-specific skills. And they all take place on Friday night. And they will start the Friday after Labor Day, which date escapes me, but I will send an email around the club and let everyone know with a specific schedule, location, and when they start, but it will be the Friday after Labor Day. I want to touch a little bit about our levels. As most of you know, we will have 4 levels in the club for those age groups that have enough players to have 4 levels. Our Premier is our A level, Select is B, Competitive is C, and Travel is our D level. I can't stress this enough. It does not matter at what age, at the younger ages, what level you're at. You know, I think I did a little bit of research a couple of years ago with our U19 team, which is essentially the OPRF varsity team where those players started. And only about 30% of those players started on the Premier team at U9, I think, or U10, that ended up in the Premier team at U19. It's just players develop at different age groups. We try and get the kids into an environment where they're as close in terms of their development to all the other players around them. There's no point a player who has developed early, who's bigger, stronger, and faster, going to play with younger and smaller players, because they spend 80% of the time with the ball, and that's great for them to develop, but it's usually at the detriment of the other players. So we try and get everybody in an environment that's conducive to their own development. And we've got a player who was with us for many years, who's going off to play soccer on a full scholarship at Yale next season, that I was just talking to one of our coaches about it. He was in our competitive team and our select team all the way up to, I think, U14, U15. He just blossomed after that, really put the extra work in, and became an excellent player in his high school years. And that's another thing that's the difference maker as you get older into high school, is that extra work outside of practices. Now, I put there at the bottom, because I get asked it a lot, about when should my player specialize in soccer. At the younger ages, it's absolutely fine. In fact, it's preferable to play multiple sports. There's lots of research that backs that up. In 2008, I remember Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers came out, about 10,000 hours. It takes, or 10,000 hours of practice it takes to become an expert in any particular field. Some of you may know the book. We had lots of players focusing on soccer at far too young of an age, and that leads to repetitive injuries. It can lead to burnout. It didn't really help the situation at all. So there's plenty of research that goes against that playing multiple sports at your younger ages is far more beneficial in the long term. But that being said, it's not rocket science. The more you play at something as you get older, the better you get at it. The difference maker to the players that will perhaps go and play varsity or go and play college is that the amount of work they put in their later years outside of practices. They just playing with friends at Lake Street. It doesn't need to be expensive clinics. It doesn't need to be one-on-one training. It's just a case of getting out there with a soccer ball, or getting out there with a ball with their friends and just playing pickup soccer as much as they can. That really makes a difference. Because we've been doing this so long, we've seen lots of generations of players come through our club from 7 to 18. And you can almost tell at 7 to 14, which players are going to end up at the top at the end. And it may not be the Premier players, it may not be select, it could be the competitive and travel, but it's always the ones who play outside of practice that just have an intrinsic motivation to play. Because really, at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to encourage, is to develop an intrinsic motivation to play soccer. So some tips about good sports parenting. This is an excellent community. We have lots of really great families. But like any family, I'm a dad too. You love your kids unconditionally. And I've seen some very, very nice people turn into raving lunatics on the sideline of a youth soccer game. So I can't stress this enough, to keep it positive and keep it in perspective. This youth development, this youth sports experience that many of you are about to embark on is really short. I feel incredibly old when I see our seniors graduating from the club, and because it just feels like yesterday that they were just starting the club at 7, 8, 9 years old, and it goes so quickly. So I can't stress it enough, just to keep it positive and keep it in perspective. Please don't coach from the sidelines. I can't tell you how detrimental that is for all experience of your player, and detrimental it is to development overall. It's confusing. It could be counteracting what the coach is saying. And I liken it to your kid doing a piano recital or some kind of musical recital. If they play a wrong note, you don't shout real-time feedback if they play a wrong note. So if your kid makes a mistake, that's okay. We want kids to be comfortable making mistakes. The best players in the world make mistakes playing soccer. So mistakes are fine. Encouragement is great, but keep the coaching out of the sidelines and leave that to the coach. Don't analyze the game on the journey home. A really hard one. Again, as a soccer parent myself, I find it incredibly difficult not to. But there's a lot of damage can be done on the journey home. And we have some away games that might be 45 minutes to an hour away. And so much damage can be done in that 45 minutes, excuse me. Emotions are high. You might have lost a tough game. It might have been contentious. those aren't teachable moments. There are teachable moments out there, maybe the next day, and you want to bring something up specifically about the game. That's great. But don't rehash games when emotions are still running high. It doesn't help the overall experience. And I know how difficult that is. And release the pressure. Focus on the process, not the outcome. I do it myself. First thing you ask when your kid comes through the door, if you haven't been at their game, is, did you win? Just the worst question you could possibly ask because you focused on the outcome. And I do it all the time. So focus on, did you have fun? What kind of things did you do in the game that you worked on in practice? That kind of thing. That's a real difficult paradigm to shift, trust me, but it really helps just focusing on the process of getting better rather than the short-term outcome of winning or losing, because it doesn't matter. It matters in the moment, but overall, looking back on an experience or a youth sports experience, winning or losing in the short term doesn't make a difference to where you end up in the long term. And remember, soccer is a very hard sport. It's difficult. As I mentioned before, the best players in the world make lots of mistakes. There's a very popular adult league that play at League Street every Sunday morning, and I've watched a few games just because I've been coaching after it, and the same dads who I see shouting at their kid for making mistakes are making all the same mistakes while they're playing in that adult league on the Sunday. So everyone should understand just how hard soccer is. It's a skill-based sport and it takes years to get proficient at it, and even professionals sometimes aren't that proficient at it. And so most importantly, enjoy it. Embrace the experience over the next few years, how long your kid is involved with us or just their youth sports experience in general, because it'll be over before you know it. You know, my greatest joy of this job is seeing ex-players who have been with us for many years, and they talk really positively and so fondly about their time with the club. You know, the stories they talk about with their families at Thanksgiving or Christmas in 10, 20, 30 years are the things that will happen in your youth sports experience. So make them good stories, make them enjoyable to retell in the next few decades, because as I said before, it goes so quickly, and it should be really enjoyable experience for you and your player. So we have some resources to help you navigate the youth sports experience, really to get the most out of the club, get the most out for your family and your player. I will show you quickly where, if you'll indulge me a little bit, I am going to stop share and then reshare on my website. Sorry, excuse me. All right, it's not cooperating, so I will get out of that. All right, it's not cooperating, but basically you can find these parent tips in your account on the website. If you go to resources, which is in the top menu bar, and click that and scroll down, there's lots of little short videos, 1 minute to 90 seconds, just to how to navigate different scenarios that you will come up with during your youth sports experience. This one I'm just going to show you is about just over 1 minute, and it's just about parent tips for the sidelines. There's ones to how to navigate adversity, you know, what to say when your kid is upset after losing a game, and just different scenarios like that. It's from Changing the Game series, which was started by a man named John O'Sullivan. As a person I've been on a panel with a number of times, just talking about youth sports. He's wrote some books. He does these parent guides, and they're really, really helpful. So if you have any questions about how to navigate certain situations with your child, because children have been through a lot in the last 4 or 5 years, and dealing with adversity, it can be difficult, especially for the young players. I highly encourage you to look at some of these videos. So I'm going to run this just for 1 minute, just to give you an example of what those resources look like.
I think one of the things as a parent, and I have been a parent for, 16 years now, watching my own kids play sports, and we want to intervene. We want to steal the reps sometimes. We want to jump in and tell our kids to kick it, to shoot, to pass, to step up, to move back. But again, when we're stealing those reps from our children, when we're coaching from the sideline, what's happening is we're stealing learning opportunities. We're often confusing them because we're not at practice all week, so we don't even know what the coach has told them to do. So the coach is telling them oftentimes something else than we're telling them, and they can't listen to 20, 30, 40 voices. They really only need to listen to their teammates and themselves and maybe their coach. So on the sideline of your games, by all means be present. By all means cheer. By all means, don't tell people what to do. Don't tell them what to pass, where to move, or anything like that. Let that moment belong to them. And my biggest piece of advice is if you struggle to stand on the sideline of the game and not give instructions, stand further away. So if you're sitting up in the bleachers, you'll probably yell less instructions than if you're sitting 5 yards from the touchline, because I think there's a direct correlation between how close you stand to the game and how much you want to yell instructions.
Okay, so that was just an example
I think one of the things
of the resources we have at the website. Again, if you go to your account on our website, go to resources at the top, and you'll see a bunch of information in there, short videos, and that's changing the project. But I can't stress enough, this is a great experience for you and your family. So please be the best sports parent you can be and maximize the experience for you and your child. And let us help you. Let us know if you need anything from us as a club or what we can do better. We're always open to feedback. Now, questions. I'm sorry to drone on for so long. Hopefully, I've answered most of your questions that you may have had, but if there's anything specific, please put it in the chat, unmute yourself, and let me know. Gavin, were there any questions as we went along there?
Only a couple, and I answered them
Okay.
or either on the thing or separately.
Great. Oh, game schedule. Yes,
I can answer that one. It'll probably be next week. The coaches have been working on them this past 2 weeks. There was a period where the leagues give all the clubs and coaches a chance to move them around. So that comes to an end basically this weekend. So we are hoping to get them out next week.
Yeah, and Gav, is there anything I missed? Because I know I went off on a few tangents.
Not really. I mean, nothing without droning on about my smaller details that I think realistically, if anybody has those types of questions, like you said, depending on what it is, whether it be uniforms, fields, admin, registration type stuff, I think that can be, addressed separately.
Yeah, I saw. There's one. Sorry to cut you off there, Gav. The one question: if your player wants to go more than 2 schedules, absolutely, your player can go to a 3rd, 4th practice. But we do. I forgot to mention there, or maybe I did. We have to okay it with the coach. It's usually always okay, but we just have to prevent the coach being inundated with 10 extra players at a practice. So if your player wants 3, 4 practices a week, they can have at it. Absolutely. But just get in touch with either your coach or me, and we can work out which practice that should be.
Yeah.
And, a lot of our players who got, I think I left this part out, but we've had about 60 to 70 plus players go off and play college in the last 10 years. We've had a couple of professional players go off and play in Spain and Sweden. And those players, without exception, were players who did attend 3 or 4 practices as they got older. They did do the work away from the field. Again, that doesn't necessarily need to be expensive programs, because I know our program's expensive, but spending more on top of that can just be going down to Lake Street and working on their own or working with buddies. That really makes a difference as they get older. So yes, it's not rocket science, but definitely we're here to accommodate that. Any other questions?
No, I don't see any. Just I can do a quick little update. Anybody that's going to one of the tournaments we're going to, the Schaumburg game schedule is out and now up on the team pages. The Palatine Celtic Cup one probably won't be out for another week yet. They've only just closed their registration, but just in case people had questions about or wondered about that.
And just quickly about tournaments, we do send older teams to college showcase tournaments. For example, we've been to Las Vegas for many years in a row. We went to Phoenix, but we we don't send our younger players to those kind of faraway lands. They may do an out-of-town tournament, maybe in Indianapolis, somewhere relatively local as they get older, move through the program.
I was just answering that.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Coach Mark is coach. Yeah. Okay, excellent. Well, thanks again. Have a great evening, and I look forward to seeing you on the field.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.